get it going now. Good evening. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sam Patrica. I'll be moderating tonight. And I direct the Society and Politics Committee here at the Union. And in conjunction with Badger Catholic and Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, we managed to put on this event tonight. We're really excited about it. And just to kind of give you an overview of how the evening will be going, we'll be covering 4 major moral issues in the context of religious and irreligious belief. Those concepts will be gay marriage, abortion, stem cell research, and contraception. And each group will have a chance to highlight their beliefs in a brief 3-minute statement, and then they'll be able to go back and forth and ask each other questions for 7 minutes. And then we'll do that with each of the subsequent issues. At the end of the event, we'll have a 30-minute period for people to ask questions. We'll be forming 2 lines on the right and left sides of the rooms. You can address any group you want, but we would say that Badger Catholic questions go on this side, Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics questions go on this side. And please be respectful. I know that this is a very conflicting viewpoint type of issue, but we just want to remember that we're all kind of playing for the same side, so let's keep it fun. And yeah, so I'm going to let these 2 groups introduce themselves, and we will start with Badger Catholic. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Madeline Gibson. I am a senior here at UW. I am double majoring. My first major is in French. My second major is in gender and women's studies. Fun fact about me, I love interfaith discussions, and I love meeting new people and hearing where they're coming from. Thanks.
My name is Matt Byer. I'm a 4th-year graduate student in medical physics. I'm a Catholic. Fun fact about me, I play the band.
Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Netry. I'm a senior here majoring in English and history. And let's see, I guess a fun fact about me is I studied abroad in England last year.
My name is Mindy Westlake, and I'm a 3rd-year veterinary medical student, and I went to undergrad here too. A fun fact about me would be I actually own 2 pet cows, and one of them can actually ride. And recently one of them had a baby, and I named it Crypto, like Cryptosporidium parvum, which causes diarrhea.
My name is Quinn Heck. I'm a freshman right now, and I'm planning on studying biochemistry. Fun fact, I guess, but I had to fill my science fair.
My name is Laura Burns. I'm a freshman majoring in molecular biology, and a fun fact, or not so fun fact right now, is that I'm a gymnast, and that's how I used my knee when I get injured before this.
Hi, my name is Mike Remuda. I'm a junior studying astronomy and math, and fun fact about me, I did come up with one.
Hey, I'm Chris Calvey. I'm a 3rd-year graduate student studying cellular and molecular biology, and we weren't informed that we're supposed to say fun facts, so this is totally unfair. But fun fact, I love Scandinavia.
All right, now that we've gotten to meet our panel debaters, let's get it started on the topic of gay marriage, atheists, humanists, and agnostics. If you'd like to start with your opening remarks.
So how's this for you? The United States loves to promote its claim of being the equal rights capital of the world, but that is not possible when millions of Americans are not eligible for the same rights because of their sexual preference. The percentage of gay Americans is widely debated because it is a difficult number to find. Even the most conservative estimates given by anti-gay activists put the number between 4 and 10%. This is between 9 and 22.5 million adult Americans who do not share the same rights as heterosexuals. While many anti-gay activists try to construe the percentage into a small number, millions of people are being forced to abide by the rules of religions that they do not follow. Acting like this is a small number is a serious issue. Even with such conservative statistics, this is the same as not giving equal rights to every single person in 17 separate states. Socially and economically, gay couples face drastic challenges that do not face straight married couples. Economically, a surviving partner cannot collect Social Security benefits or any other financial benefits from his or her deceased partner. This is similar to if a last will and testament has not been written. The other partner will not gain inheritance as is normal in a married couple. In only 20 states is it legal for a gay couple to adopt a child, and a gay individual can adopt a child in all but 4 states. This is a clear problem of equal rights. Though strides have been made by the government to further allow rights to gay couples, this is very similar to the Separate but Equal Act. Instead of granting complete equal rights, we are slowly granting rights to those with different sexual preferences. A complaint that gay marriage will disrupt the sanctity of marriage is a popular argument by the religious, which is odd. I say this because in the United States, which has a divorce rate that is accepted as being between 48 and 52%, is one of the top 10 highest rates in the world. The sanctity of marriage is an idea where a marriage is sacred and should not in any way be ended once it is started. To say that anything that disrupts the sanctity of marriage is wrong and should therefore be illegal is an entirely bold and hypocritical argument. Divorce defiles the sanctity of marriage. So if divorce continues to be legal, the continued prohibition of gay marriage is illogical on these grounds. If 2 consenting adults love each other, who are you to say that their love is not the right kind of love? No one has this right to say this, that because someone else is different, they should not be given equal rights. We overcame this very same problem with anti-interracial marriage laws in the 1960s through the Supreme Court case of Loving versus Virginia. Yet the Catholic Church waited until a month before the 2.5-year trial had ended to change their view on interracial marriage. This made the Catholic Church the last large institution to change their views. I see no difference from this issue and gay marriage. Society has come to outlaw hundreds of moral statutes that the Catholic Church has held. I cannot find a moral reason why we should enforce this part of Catholic dogma on our secular nation.
Thank you very much. Patrick, I think you're on the side.
Same-sex relationships can be loving, committed, and entirely amiable. If we consider marriage to be, as I believe it is, an emotional union, an unreserved gift of self between 2 people, there seem to be no reasons why same-sex relationships cannot be considered as marriages. If these relationships bear the same characteristics as opposite-sex ones, why is it not unjust discrimination for the state to label one as marriage, granting it special rights and benefits, and do nothing for the other? I think the answer to the question depends on just what marriage is. Marriage is not only about love, but also about how that love can give rise to new life. One purpose of marriage is the mutual help, love, and support of the spouses, but its other essential purpose is the creation and raising of children. It is this purpose that sets it apart from any other human relationship. Marriage has always been the union of a man and a woman for the same reason there are 2 sexes in the first place. Because a relationship between a man and a woman is the way, given to us by our biology and by God, that new human life comes into the world. Same-sex relationships may be loving, exclusive, and committed, but by their nature, they are not the kind of relationships that lead to and are fulfilled by children. This does not mean that same-sex couples cannot raise children well. It does not mean that these couples have no possible claims on the state. It does mean that same-sex relationships and opposite-sex relationships are fundamentally different. And because they are different, the state is not unjust to make distinctions between them. I think when we lose our understanding of the connection between marriage and children, there's a danger that marriage becomes more about our emotional needs than the objective good of children and of families. Marriage cannot be based on our desires alone. If that is the case, if it's only based on our desires, divorce becomes an option because we feel we can't be obligated to stay with our spouse if our desires at the time lie elsewhere. Infidelity starts to seem inevitable because our desires for sexual satisfaction are now paramount. Even children's lives can become subject to our preferences, as when we see that 90% of babies that are prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome end up aborted. Marriage suffers when it is separated from the good of children, and children suffer as a result. Now, same-sex marriage is not the cause of this problem, and simply preserving the legal structure of traditional marriage will not solve it. But placing same-sex marriage into the law on the same footing as opposite-sex marriage amounts to a proclamation by the state that children have nothing to do with the man at all, which can only further erode our understanding of marriage and its purpose.
Thank you very much. Picking students of Agnostics, you have 7 minutes for responding questions.
I guess my first question would be, how are you specifically hurt by same-sex marriage?
How am I specifically here?
Or how is anyone specifically hurt by same-sex marriage in a way that we should not make people possible?
Well, I think if you're asking what direct harms are there, I would agree with what you would probably say on that. I don't think any opposite-sex couples, no married couples in, say, New York State are going to get divorced because of same-sex marriage being passed in that state. But what I said at the end of my statement gets to what I think the harms are, in that I believe that marriage is a specific thing. It is a certain kind of relationship, and to have the state give that status to a relationship that is not actually marriage, it blurs the line as to what marriage is and the benefits and purpose of the institution as a whole. And we've gone a long way towards that already, and I think making opposite-sex marriage an institution continue along that road.
Right, so I assume you're opposed to marriage being defined for you by another religion, say Mormonism or Islam. Why is it acceptable to have your religion's definition of marriage forced on people who do not share your views?
Well, I think marriage is an institution that is not confined to the Catholic religion or the Muslim religion or any other kind of religion. I think it has an objective content. I think that it crosses over between different religions and non-religious traditions. And obviously there's variation in between them. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any religious tradition or any culture. I'm sure they do exist, but the vast majority of cultures in the history of the world have defined marriages between man and woman. And so this is what marriage is. It cuts across. It's not just a Catholic idea. It's a human idea.
I guess then with that, why can't there be a church or like religious definition for each religion recognized by those in your faith, and a separate legal marriage definition recognized by our secular government?
Sorry, so to repeat the question, why can there not be a religious definition and a separate secular definition?
So that gay couples are given all the same rights as straight couples.
Well, I guess to make the same point again, I don't think marriage is an exclusively religious institution. It's a public institution. It's a civic institution. And I think it has a reality apart from, it existed before the Catholic Church was founded. And so to have two different definitions would not be true of what marriage is.
So you don't think it can be changed anyway?
I don't think it can be changed in the essentials of what the relationship is.
So to go back to your opening statement, you say that because same-sex couples cannot have children of their own, they should not be able to marry. What then do you say to sterile couples who are biologically able to produce children? Should they also not be able to marry?
That's a good question. Infertile couples are still in marriage. The children, the idea of children, it's not to say that marriage is validated and defined by children, not to say that it must produce children. It's not a utilitarian argument. It's the idea that a marriage is the kind of relationship that is oriented towards creating and raising children. And so an infertile couple is still a marriage. It's still that kind of relationship. It's a relationship where that something has gone wrong. A same-sex relationship, if it could not produce a child, that's exactly what you would expect. So an infertile marriage.
So essentially you're saying gay couples, they can't make the kids, but for infertile couples, they can raise kids. That's your point?
Not quite. My argument was about what marriage is and what kind of relationship it is. And to make that argument, we look at what marriages do, what is unique about them, and the salient fact, I think, here is that marriages are the kind of relationship that create and raise children. And so an infertile couple is still that same kind of relationship, it's just not perfect in a certain way. Whereas a same-sex couple is a different kind of relationship. That's my argument.
Couldn't you say that it's the same kind of relationship? It's just two different genders, or two of the same gender?
I think that's the crucial difference.
Okay.
Okay, so on that point, you say that gay couples are fundamentally different from straight couples. Because of this, you say they should not be given equal rights in marital status. Can you explain how this is, besides being the same sex, obviously, and having no children, and not being able to have children? This is the same form of argument, mind you, that was used to not allow interracial marriages as well. How is this any different?
So how is it similar to the argument that disallowed marriage?
Because they tried to define interracial marriages as being different from, say, two white people being married, was fundamentally different from black and white men being couple being married.
Well, I would say that argument was incorrect.
I would agree.
That's my opinion. And I'll tell you why it was incorrect. Because race has nothing whatsoever to do with marriage. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the kind of relationship that marriage is. Whereas sex and gender is part of what marriage is. It's in what the relationship is. It's relevant because this is what the institution is about.
That's all the time I have for questions. Patrick Catholic, it's your turn to ask questions to the Agnostics. You have 7 minutes.
So, in your view, what is the state's interest in marriage at all? Why should it be a regulated, kind of registered relationship?
I think it should be regulated by the state because in situations where a couple is, like I had mentioned in my opening statement, where a deceased partner, they cannot have the social security benefits of their lifelong partner, they cannot be committed to those because they're same sex. I think that the state has to step in these situations to allow this equal right to a same-sex couple, or in the situation where a gay couple wants to adopt, they should be allowed to have the same right as a straight couple to adopt at the same rate. So I think the state needs to help initiate that equality.
So, but marriage in general, I'm saying, as a institution, as a whole, what is the state's interest in passing laws and making that an official kind of relationship?
I think what you're getting at, what's probably true, is that historically they wanted to encourage it, to encourage people to have, children and stable families and whatnot. But I mean, that's an argument from tradition, basically. It used to be a tradition that interracial marriages were frowned upon. We rightly decided that we're not going to follow that tradition anymore. And there will come a time when people finally realize that homosexual marriages, which used to be frowned upon, that was a tradition that we're going to overcome sooner or later.
So you think it's mere tradition that the state is interested in the health and well-being of children?
I said
that can be, passed away. That can go away if you wanted to.
Well, I said that was the origin of it. They're still interested in children, supporting that now. But even you admitted in your opening statement that homosexual couples can be raising children just as well.
So then, what is, kind of get more of my point, what is unique about marriage among relationships that the state should be interested in it, rather than close friendships, say?
I think the difference between marriage and a type of close friendship is that it's two people who want to be committed to each other romantically and through all the benefits one has with the other. They want to share their lives together. And that's different than a kind of close friendship which changes. It's a commitment to a person, and I don't think that you have the right to tell people who they can and cannot be committed to.
So, Quinn, you mentioned earlier, you thought the reason that same-sex marriage should be made into law was for these concrete benefits. If there was some sort of other legal status that was available, like a civil union or something similar to that, that would provide those kind of rights, would that be sufficient, or would that satisfy the needs, or would it need to be full equality in status as marriage?
I think the name is not as big an issue as the rights given. The federal government says there's 1,300 rights given to a married couple. There's not going to be a gay couple. So I think that if the rights are there, if they name it something, a gay couple is not going to care. I think that you can, this is kind of one of the questions that earlier is, why can't there be a church or religious recognition recognized by your faith and a legal married regulation like recognized by the secular government? That's what I was getting at, is that there can be that. It doesn't have to be called the same thing. Your church can represent it in some way, and as long as they're equally represented in the eyes of the government.
I just wanted to add to that also, while there can be, within the religious institution, different definitions, I think the state has a responsibility to determine a marriage, because otherwise we are falling into the same separate but equal problem that we used to have. And I think using a different name to term marriage is in itself not giving people a right, and it's a lesser thing.
So if gay marriage becomes law, should religious institutions be forced to celebrate them? Say the Catholic Church, should be allowed to still have that separate definition?
I mean, I would have to agree with what New York has just done when they passed their gay marriage law. I mean, churches do not have to marry, they do not have to, it can be through the state. So I don't think a church should have to celebrate it if it's not their view. I think eventually it'll happen just like interracial marriages, where some churches didn't celebrate it, they didn't accept it until it was law, and they kind of came to this stance where they looked completely immoral. And I feel like it would eventually come, but I don't think they would have to.
We support the right of the church to be a bigoted institution, if that's what you want to
Would you agree, part of my argument was that marriage and children are increasingly being separated in today's society? Would you agree that that is the case, or would you?
I mean, the statistics with you, so sure. Yeah, sure, there's high birth rates, so yes.
Could you repeat that?
Yes, divorce rates are going up, so I'm sure there are more single parents than couple parents than were in the past.
Do you see problems with that? Do you think any of social problems in the past 50, 100, whatever, how many years have to do with that change?
What kind of social problem?
For example, the relatively high rates of single mothers raising children in poverty.
Yeah, the family unit's a very important of our past and our social history, but I think what you're getting at here is that a gay couple can't create an effective unit like a straight couple can as in like a family unit, and I think that's where we're going to have to disagree. I think
that's not my point. My point is more so, it would be my point of view that the meaning of marriage as something intended for children, for the good of children, has been lost in recent decades. And so, apart from the question of whether gay parents can raise good children, does that affect the separation of children and marriage as a whole? Does that have ill effects?
So what if it does then? Even if we assume that that's true, what does that have to do with gay marriage? Like, I don't see your point at all.
This is becoming a back and forth now. My point is that marriage has traditionally been understood as an institution oriented towards children, existing for children. There's nothing intrinsically related to children about a same-sex relationship. They can raise children, they can raise them successfully, but it's not a relationship that's intrinsically oriented towards that. And the connection of marriage and children, if I think is a very important part of what marriage is and the benefit it has for society.
Thank you, both groups, for that discussion on gay marriage. We're going to move to our second topic now, which is abortion. And as a Catholic, we'll start with their opening remarks on this subject. So whenever you guys are ready. Thank you. Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, your opening statement.
All right. Abortion is a tricky subject, and I should emphasize that if there's no dogma in atheism, there are certain secular arguments which make points in favor of a pro-life position. But as these guys are in favor of pro-life, I'll take the other side. The way that I view the definition of killing is that it is immoral to terminate the life of an individual person. While I will agree that a newly conceived fetus is both alive and human, I would not describe it as a person. Yes, its cells are dividing and the species is Homo sapiens, but a person is an individual with sufficient mental capacities and self-awareness. Those characteristics are what makes humans the amazing creatures that we are. A newly formed fetus, however, does not have these characteristics, and thus should not receive the same rights as a person. And when it comes down to it, the mother has greater rights than the fetus, and the right to terminate the pregnancy. A counter-argument is, well, that fetus may not be a person, but it is a potential person, and that's just as good. I disagree with that. I see no reason why a potential person should have the same rights as a real person. And if it's murder to purposely cause a potential person not to be born, then women commit murder every month if they don't become pregnant, and men commit murder on a homeless guy. As a result of being pro-choice, I have to draw the line in the sand as to when pregnancy can be legally terminated. This is tough. There's a sliding scale of morality. It gradually becomes less moral to terminate pregnancy as the fetus develops. But scientists can see that it is in the 6th month of pregnancy when large-scale neuron structures emerge in fetuses. That's when the brainwaves of fetuses begin to resemble that of an adult human. It's also when the fetus has the ability to survive outside of its womb. It's at this point, when the fetus is an individual person, that it is immoral to terminate. This is when its right to life begins. A pro-lifer will draw the line in the sand at conception, minus simply 6 months later. Enough time for the mother to determine if she feels she can provide a promising life to her offspring. Before that time, though, a woman should have the full right to terminate a pregnancy if she deems it necessary.
Thank you very much. Now, Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, it's your turn to question views put forth by Magic.
Thank you. I'll start right to it. Is it moral to terminate a fetus to save a mother's life?
There are some very rare circumstances, for example, ectopic pregnancy, in which a child starts to develop in the fallopian tubes of the woman. And in that situation, the child cannot survive that type of pregnancy, and mother's health is at risk. So in that situation, an abortion becomes an option because the child has a chance of survival. But in a situation that's not as extreme as that, we have to consider that this life within the woman is as valuable as the woman's life herself. Not more valuable, but they're both individuals, and they both deserve to be respected as such, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, well, how do we hypothesize that the fetus was conceived through rape? How do you guys feel about that?
I think again it goes back to the idea of that being a unique person. And if you have two people, the woman and the child, these are both individuals and they both deserve to be respected as such. A child his or her value does not depend on how he or she is conceived. And while we certainly understand and acknowledge that rape is a terrible, terrible situation that a woman has to face, the fact that a child is conceived in rape does not make that child any less valuable.
So you think that a woman should have to spend 9 months with her attacker's child within her, and then you think that? What punishment do you think there should be for mothers that have received abortions?
I don't believe we're advocating for punishment here at all. We're talking about just abortion and what it is, and just the impact that abortion has. What abortion is it ends a life that is developing, and that's wrong, and that's what we're trying to get across here today.
Well, if you're ending a life that's a person and it has the same rights as the woman, shouldn't there be some sort of, shouldn't that be a crime? Isn't that murder by definition? Shouldn't she premeditated murder? Shouldn't she have to go to jail for that?
I mean, if abortion was made illegal, and we would like to see it made illegal because we do believe that it is a moral act. So in that case, yes, if the state someday makes abortion illegal, then there would be repercussions to that. But until that happens, we obviously don't have systems in place to punish.
Okay, because 43% of women will have an abortion before they're 45 years old. So you're saying 43% of women before they're 45 years old would be tried for murder? I know, but like abortion, it's a legal aspect. It's more than moral.
I think that's also a sign, though, that our society is not meeting the needs of women who are finding themselves in unexpected pregnancies. And the fact that so many women are feeling forced into this situation where they have to abort suggests that they're not receiving the support that they need from their families and people around them. They're not receiving the material and financial resources, or they're just not making decisions about how they're conducting themselves. And there's a lot of factors that go into an unplanned pregnancy, and it's not just punishment that we're looking at here, but sort of the whole culture that's behind it that makes abortion problematic.
All right. You stated that our identity as human persons runs much deeper than our appearance, intellect, or level of independence. What do you mean by that? How is humanity deeper than our intellect and appearance?
I don't believe that we can define who we are as people just because of one or two factors that characterize us. For example, I gave an example in my opening statement about if we use intellect as a criteria for defining what a person is, infants do not have an intellectual capacity like an adult does. And in that sense, do we define an infant as a person? It becomes problematic. I think just looking around it and seeing how humans are different from any other life form, there's obviously something different about people. And I think recognizing that rather than trying to define a person based on a category or a stage of development just becomes problematic.
All right. Moving on.
So we don't have much time left, but I mean, I heard you right. You said that you wanted to see abortion made illegal, and then you kind of danced around the issue of what the punishment would be. But I mean, if you're going to campaign for that, you have to think about what is actually going to happen to these people. So I would like to hear a better answer from you about what the punishment should be, both for women who get abortions and for doctors who provide them.
Well, look, what you want us to say here is that we don't care about women and that we want them to go to jail. And that's not the case at all, in any form, in any sense. We have nothing but sympathy for any of the various bad situations that might bring a woman to the point of choosing abortion. We do believe that abortion ends a life, that it is murder. But as far as punishments for the woman, in my personal opinion, the situation is punishment enough. I would, I think in the instance where it was made illegal, punishments would exist for the doctors that were performing abortions. They're not under any kind of psychological duress or bad family situations or anything that drives them to the abortion. They're simply performing it. So in the case where it is illegal and we come to the conclusion as a society that it is wrong, then I think that is where the punishment would lie, but not with the woman.
I have a question. What's the mechanics? Okay.
You guys have your turn right now, so.
That's not right.
So in your opening statement, you define personhood at 6 months because brain activity can be detected at this time by an EEG, and the fetus is viable or is able to live on its own outside the womb. And why do brain waves and viability constitute personhood?
It's at this age when the fetus is essentially a person. It can develop memories. That's memory 10 minutes, but still memories. Its brain is set up just like the adult human brain. Not all the connections are made yet, but it's essentially a human brain at that point. Before then, it was just a clump of cells, something that got in a head, and then eventually brain became a being that can have thoughts. They dream. They have REM, but the same thoughts. So I define that as a person.
So does the ability to dream make someone a person?
No, I think what makes you a person is your whole mental capacity and intelligence, and just the fact that you're more than just reflexes. You can react.
Mike, do you believe that we are defined by what we do or what we can produce, not by our pure essence of who we are?
Pure essence of who we
I'm sorry.
are.
Are we defined by what we do, not who we are?
It's kind of a personal question. I mean, I think we're fine by what we do.
So for defined by what we do, what status does an infant or a disabled person have as far as
Okay, let's do what we got. Well, no, I mean, it still has thoughts. It's still, it pretty much, it has the adult brain. It just isn't acting at full capacity yet. It's still a human brain. Still a person.
A little bit earlier, you mentioned that when a fetus's brain is developing, it's a group of cells, and it develops into a brain. Isn't a completed brain that same group of cells?
No, it's different cells. I'm good.
So these are suddenly human cells, human person cells, or are they a clump of non-human person cells?
Let me answer all of these questions at once. So, Mike has chosen to draw that line at 6 months, but that's just his personal opinion. I might draw the line later, you might draw it a lot earlier. But the problem with drawing the line anywhere is that no matter what you choose, it seems very arbitrary. Because a minute before you drew that line, how can it suddenly be immoral then, but moral after that? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Drawing that line in the sand is pretty difficult. But generally, I can't speak for all atheists, but generally what we believe is that the moral worth of a fetus or an embryo during development, it kind of increases over time. So there's not one point where it's suddenly okay to have an abortion and not okay after that, but it is more okay to have an abortion in the first week of pregnancy than in the third trimester. It's a continuum of life.
So you seem to be suggesting that there's a moral development then from sort of as the child grows, correct?
Yeah.
So if it's more immoral to have an abortion at, say, 5 months rather than 3 months, correct? Then, but it's still moral the whole way through?
Well, I already told you I don't know when to say it's moral and when it's not moral. Like, that's not an easy question to answer. But it is for me easy to say that an abortion at week 1, you know, if you take the morning after pill, you might call that an abortion. And that abortion seems to me to be very obviously less bad than an abortion in the third trimester. But you don't believe that. You think they're equally bad. And that seems crazy to me.
If something is less bad than something else, doesn't that still make it bad?
If it were up to me, you know, I would take President Clinton's view of making abortions safe, legal, and rare. And the way to make them rare, perhaps I'm jumping the gun, is to have comprehensive sex education and contraception.
But for the topic at hand, would you agree that?
Nobody likes abortions. Is that what you're asking? No.
I'm asking if you think abortion is wrong.
You've got me to admit that, yes, abortions are not a great thing. I would prefer if they were normal abortions.
Thank you very much. We are going to move on to our next subject, which is stem cell research. We will open with remarks from Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics. Whenever you guys are ready.
It would not be an exaggeration to say that stem cells are among the most promising areas of research around today. The number of diseases which might be cured or treated by them reads like a laundry list from hell. Cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. The applications are practically limitless. The reason stem cells are so exciting is that they're undifferentiated, which means they have the capacity to become any other type of cell in the body. And so, stem cells could be a renewable source of tissues for treating patients of almost any disease, and for studying those diseases in the lab. And yet we aren't funding this research as much as we could. And why not? Because some people believe that embryos are worthy of our moral concern. They are not. human stem cell lines are derived from the inner cell mass of 4 to 5 day-old embryos, which are called blastocysts. We've talked a little bit about human rights and the sanctity of life, and haven't mentioned it, but souls. But let's not forget that what we're actually talking about here is cells. A blastocyst is a ball of roughly 100 cells, which have no discernible features. Nothing even remotely close to a heart or lungs or limbs, and most importantly, no brain. There's not the slightest reason to believe that these cells have the capacity to sense pain or to experience their existence in any meaningful way at all. Human beings can suffer. Therefore, I make the utilitarian argument that whatever moral worth embryos do have, it's far outweighed by the scarcely endurable suffering of hundreds of millions of people who might be cured by this research. We should be investing massive amounts of money into stem cells. But because of what Christians like you believe about souls, because of what concerns you have about a ball of cells, federal funding for embryonic stem cell research languished over the past decade. Christians proudly stood in the way of some of the most promising research in the history of medicine. And for what? For the sake of a few embryos that were going to get destroyed anyway. Sam Harris said it best when he said that anyone who feels that the interests of a blastocyst just might supersede the interests of a child who has a spinal cord injury, they have had their moral sense blinded by religious metaphysics.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Catholic, you open remarks.
Okay. As a Catholic, I believe that every human life is sacred, and the destruction and/or mutilation of human life is intrinsically wrong, irrespective of its potential to produce beneficial advances for society. The end does not justify the means. It is for this reason that we fundamentally oppose embryonic stem cell research. I believe in human equality, and that it is our moral obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And I argue that our embryonic stem cells are alive by scientific reasoning. Furthermore, I will argue that our capabilities in reprogramming and using adult stem cells, umbilical cord blood, and amniotic fluid have proven to be more effective and safer in actually providing medical therapies. The dangers of using embryonic stem cells have so far outweighed the potential benefits they have provided. It has been argued that an embryo is not equivalent of a human, which, by the way, is also a bowl of cells. Yet, from a scientific basis, it has the full complement of human genes and fulfills all requirements of what science considers to be alive. If it's too underdeveloped to be considered human life, then where do we draw the line for severely deformed, mentally disabled, or diseases that make people underdeveloped? Or to progress to points like they're violent, progressed Alzheimer's, severely impaired with Parkinson's. They're all going to die anyways. Adult stem cells, umbilical blood, and amniotic fluid have shown therapeutic successes. Adult stem cells alone have shown to benefit more than 70 disorders, including patients suffering from heart disease, corneal damage, sickle cell anemia, that list goes on. There's no moral objection to research as long as there's no harm to human beings at any stage of development. If we look at our biggest theoretical benefit from embryonic stem cells, Alzheimer's, what backs our theory of treatment? Alzheimer's involves every cell in the brain. Are we going to replace every cell? Embryonic stem cells' totipotency, which is supposed to be the benefit they provide, also makes them unstable, hypertrophic, and tumor-prone. Let's be scientists and focus on how to overcome this property. Our ability to induce somatic cells into induced pluripotent states has now recently proven to be more safe and less of an immunogenic response. This shows to be more promise and a greater success rate, with the ethical concern being donating human tissue, not a human life. Why should we move on with our promising successes to provide faster and safer benefits to our patients? And I am a Christian, and I am a scientist, and it is possible to do both.
Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, your questions for Patrick.
I have a question for Mindy, and I apologize in advance for this line of questioning, but I was wondering if you could explain to me what hypertrophic means.
Hypertrophic, be increasing in size.
Yeah, that's actually correct.
Are you thinking of my terminology?
Well, here's the reason I asked you this question.
I know there's a reason.
Do you know what the reason is?
Go ahead.
So, I had never heard the term hypertrophic used in this context, and I know nothing to hear about stem cells. I used to do research on them, actually. So I Googled the term unstable hypertrophic interferon. And what I found was that it appears only one place on the internet. And it's in this article, Bentham's Mummy and Stem Cells, from America, the National Catholic Weekly magazine. So, I was wondering, this article was written by a lawyer who has no scientific training. So I was wondering if maybe you think that this is a biased or an unbiased source of information.
It's a very biased source. So what part are you attacking? That they're stable? That they're safe? I'm not, okay, let's go back to like, what part are you attacking? The source? Because I have, here's my scientific papers that are peer reviewed.
Okay, well, I've got better points, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so let me summarize your views, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one.
I will.
So you generally believe that life begins at conception, and therefore all human life is equal. Is that more or less correct?
Yes, as previously stated in our previous argument.
Just clarifying. Okay, so I have a thought experiment for you. And I want you to imagine that you're working in an in vitro fertilization lab on the top floor. And let's say that at one end of the hallway, 10 of your colleagues are having a very important meeting. And at the other end, it's the lab's freezer room. And in that fridge, you have 10 fertilized embryos, which are scheduled to be implanted into some willing women tomorrow. And suddenly you notice that there's a huge fire that has broken out. And you realize that you only have enough time to warn people, you only have enough time to reach one end of the hallway. So my question is, do you go and warn your colleagues at one end of the hallway, or do you run to the freezer room and save those embryos?
I would yell to them and go save the embryos because they have the lights to go out.
Let's say for the purpose of this argument that it's a really long hallway.
Have you heard me yell? I have a really loud voice.
Okay, let's not dodge the
So
question.
would I go to every corridor in there and warn every single human? If your family was in that corridor, would you run to your family or would you run to your colleagues?
I'm the one asking questions here.
Can you focus on the specifics of the thought experiment, please? Thank you.
Okay. I think that is, are you trying to ask if I think that they're all equivalent of a human life?
I believe you said that.
Yes, I do believe that. And you're asking me, Sophie's choice, to choose between which, I believe they're both human. You're asking me which humans. I think innately I would go with people I'm friends with. If I had two humans on each side of a corridor, and I could only run to one side, I'm gonna pick my friends.
I think that's reasonable. Let's say that it's the same situation, but now you have the opportunity to save 1,000 cells. That's 1,000 fertilized embryos in the freezer versus 10, or let's say 1 human in the office room.
Okay, are you trying to justify something that ends? See, if there are 100 people in here, and there's my one child down there, I'm not really sure if you're trying to say the end justifies the means, or if you're trying to make me pick between people, because I'm not really sure
It's a very simple question. There's a fire. You have the opportunity to save people at one end of the hallway. Are you going to save one human, or are you going to save 1,000 embryos?
I don't really think
Either
that
one.
exactly has to do with, I don't think the end justifies the means. That's not a direct comparison to embryonic stem cell research where we're deliberately.
I'm asking you which one you would save. It's a very simple question. You have two choices. One human, 1,000 embryos. Which is more valuable to you to save?
Is the human my friend? Somebody I know?
For the sake of argument, no.
Okay, I don't really think that's a direct comparison.
People of the audience.
I think what you're trying to get at is that you're trying to ask me if I think embryos are human life. Yes, I think they are.
So, if they are human life, then logically, you would rather save 1,000 lives than one life, right?
Not at the cost, the end is not justified the means. So I have to kill somebody to save them? No. If I don't, yes.
You're not killing them. You're either saving the embryos and running out of the building with them, or you're saving the person and running down the hallway or warning them.
Quiet, please.
I think your inability to answer this question is demonstrating that you don't actually believe that those embryos have lives that are equally valuable to human lives. If you did believe that,
so you're making that jump right there? Like, do you think that the number justifies something?
it's simple arithmetic. If you have a choice between saving one person and saving 1,000 people, you would save 1,000 people. But I guess we're out of time, but the fact that you can't say confidently that you would go for the 1,000 embryos proves to me that you don't think that they're equal to normal human lives.
I disagree, but
Patrick Catholic, it's your turn to ask questions.
Okay.
You stated that stem cells are among the most promising areas of medical research today, and that they might someday cure cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. Do you have anything to say about how the fact that their totipotency also causes them to cause teratomas, which is like the three different cells, the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm all arise, or are the three different layers that are the germ cell that are in this neoplastic teratoma. Anything about the the ability for these to be safe, and the fact that they are immunogenic and are rejected? Do you have anything to say about the fact that they haven't shown a lot of benefit?
First of all, embryonic stem cells aren't totipotent, they're pluripotent. And the potency, use that word, is an important reason why embryonic stem cells are more valuable than adult stem cells. I'm sure you're well aware that adult stem cells are multipotent, which means that they have the ability to turn to multiple kinds of cells, but they're not pluripotent. Pluripotent means that they have the ability to turn into almost all kinds of cells. That's one of the main reasons why embryonic stem cells are more valuable. Now, you're asking me about the safety concerns, and I will readily admit that adult stem cells, one of the advantages of that area of research is that it's autologous, which means it can come from your own body, which kind of avoids the issues of your immune system rejecting them. And yeah, I'll admit that's one of the advantages of adult stem cells.
Okay, so we actually have, you can induce adult stem cells to be pluripotent now, to be more embryonic-like, and they have much more capacities. So what would the argument, and we've actually just discovered, there's a paper printed November 15th of this year, about how you can actually induce these pluripotent cells, and then you take away the teratoma forming by taking their progenitor cells from that. So why should we put more funding into embryonic when we prove that these are safer and they're less rejected?
So it's funny that you say induced pluripotent stem cells are safer, because they're not. And they're a new technology, and the way that they actually work is you have a regular adult somatic stem cell, and you introduce genes into them that you have these, master transcriptional regulators. You can think of them as like, the CEOs of the cell. They kind of control lots of other different genes beneath them. And when you overexpress those cells, it leads to cancer.
You're right. It's progenitor cells from those cells. It was just as the paper was just printed and discovered that those are actually safe. You're right. The induced pluripotency, which the point of it being you make them embryonic-like, which causes cancer. It's their progenitor cells, and this was proved for cardiomyocytes.
Well, I'm not familiar with that paper exactly.
It's just really recent new stuff. I just don't understand why we should put funding into something that kills what isn't life.
Well, okay. So one of the central arguments that you make is that adult stem cells have more proven therapeutic potential, and that's true. But it's also true that they've been around for 40 or more years in terms of bone marrow transplants and things like that. Human embryonic stem cells have only been around since 1998. They were first isolated here on this campus, as I'm sure you know, Jamie Thompson's lab. So even though it might be true that they don't yet have as many therapies as adult stem cells, it's because they were developed much later, and it simply takes a lot of time for scientists to make sure that things are safe and to develop the technology and to eventually have human trials, which are ongoing at the moment. If you ask any stem cell scientist, well, just about anyone, they will all agree that for stem cell research, you need to investigate all lines that are possible. If you want to cure diseases, you shouldn't do it with one hand tied behind your back. You should invest money in every kind of research that's good. It's promising.
Okay, so you also mentioned the ability to do spinal cord. So the biggest embryonic stem cell spinal cord researcher just backed out, and nothing they were doing was showing benefits to the children that they were treating. This is, I don't know how to pronounce the Garon in California.
Yeah, that was one of the few human embryonic stem cell trials that were going on, and it is true that they just decided to end that trial. It's not entirely clear why they did it. Well, first of all, it was a phase 1 clinical trial, so mostly they were testing it for safety, and it has proven to be safe. They didn't end it because it was unsafe. But I think it's probably, well, part of the reason they decided to pull out the trial was more of a financial decision, that they just wanted to pursue their cancer research, which seemed to be more profitable.
Okay.
So that was a business decision, probably not a science one.
Okay.
One more question.
So what about going back to more the topic at hand, that these blastocysts have no capacity to think, feel, or suffer? What do you think about people who have a hindered mental capacity, or people who have progressed Alzheimer's? Are they more expendable? Can we expend more people to save the greater good? Everybody is going to die anyways.
That's true. I thought it was funny in your opening remark when you said that those kinds of people are also a ball of cells, because it's kind of a funny comparison to make, because it's true that they're made up of cells, but a blastocyst is literally a ball of cells, and for me it's quite easy to see the difference between a ball, a literal sphere of cells, and a human being, a person. It's quite easy for me to make that distinction,
But you would still agree that we are made of cells. That's all thought.
We are definitely made of cells.
So again, where do you draw the line? So what makes somebody who doesn't have the mental capacity that we do
more expendable?
Well, I mean, let's just pick any line to draw in the sand. I think the moment of birth is a pretty clear Rubicon that we can draw and say that after that, all human life is more or less equal.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for this issue. We will move on to our fourth and final topic, which is contraception. We will start with opening remarks from Patrick Catholic, so whenever you guys are ready.
There are a multitude of reasons why Catholics do not believe in the use of hormonal contraception. I could simply discuss how the pill is on the list of group 1 carcinogens, how the NuvaRing causes cervical cancer, or how the double Provera shot increases the risk of breast cancer. NuvaRing causes cervical bleeding, how the double Provera shot increases the risk of breast cancer, or how the IUD is directly linked to endometriosis, all proving that women's bodies are indeed harmed by contraception, this being one reason why we disagree with the use of it. But I'm choosing instead to discuss the ever-popular topic of sexual intercourse. What is it that makes sex so special? It is unlike any other human act. For instance, there are rules at universities that prohibit professors from having sex with their students, yet there are no rules that prohibit professors from organizing a tennis match with their students. Society has long recognized that sex is different. Catholic Christians recognize that there is a deep meaning to sex, that it touches the center of a person's being, and that it's not purely physical. At its basis, sex has a twofold significance. First, it is unitive. Sex is the perfect physical expression of God's love for us, and it unites two people more than any other physical act. But second, it is procreative. It is meant to bring forth life. Even deeper than that, sex is a communion, not only between the two persons, freely giving themselves to each other and accepting one another in love, but also a communion with God. God created man and woman in such a way that through their bodies, it would be self-evident to them that they are called to love, called to give themselves to one another. We fulfill the reason for our existence by loving, and our physical bodies were made precisely to show us this and be means by which we accomplish this. When contraception is used, the total reciprocal self-gift of man and woman is neglected. So, sex is a serious yet beautiful matter. It is a sacred image of God who is love, and it demonstrates that human beings were created by God for a purpose. To be loving persons who freely choose to love, to give themselves to the person who expresses their self-giving through their bodies. I want a man to love me when he has sex with me. I want him to recognize my completeness, not only the body that God has given me, but my entirety, my dignity, and my ability to bring forth life. He has to love me entirely. If he uses a condom, or even more, encourages me to use some form of hormonal contraception, then that says to me that he only wants a part of me to be used for his own physical pleasure and not my complete self, and vice versa. Sex, then, becomes using another person, objectifying them. If we use a barrier method, be it hormonal or another artificial form, we don't give ourselves fully to one another. We become a half gift, no, less to one another. And how important is it to live out our sexuality in a way which upholds and affirms the other person? Indeed, the true lover will never use another person or treat her as a means to an end. I believe in love. I believe that we were made for love. And I do not believe contraceptive sex is love.
Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, your opening remarks.
Widely available contraception is one of the greatest socially stabilizing innovations of the 20th century. Contraception offers the benefits of family planning, protection from STDs, and a general empowerment of the individual to make choices in his or her sex life based upon an intrinsic moral compass rather than fear of pregnancy or disease. From the atheist perspective, contraception is not so much an issue or controversy as it is a modern technology improving quality of life. It seems illogical to shirk technology that provides such clear-cut societal benefits. As of 2009, it costs, on average, $291,570 to raise a child in the United States. This makes family planning extremely important. The addition of a single child can be an enormous financial burden on a family. In fact, children in families of 3 or more are at a 10% increased risk of poverty as compared to their only child or single sibling peers. While children are sources of joy to families, it is irresponsible not to take care and plan for how many children to have when the resources to do so are readily available. Certain forms of contraception also help prevent the spread of STDs, making for a significantly healthier population. The overwhelming majority of sexually active individuals have had more than one partner in their lifetime. For the sake of both the individual and his or her partner, taking precaution to ensure there is no disease transmission should one or the other be unknowingly infected makes both logical and ethical sense. It is also important to deal with the reality that unintended pregnancy and STDs run particularly rampant among youth aged 13 to 24, a group ill-prepared to deal with the consequences of either of these realities. Nevada, Texas, and Mississippi have among the top 5 teen pregnancy rates in the nation, and they accepted federal funding for abstinence-only education, while Maine and Minnesota have among the lowest, and they rejected this funding. Whether we as individuals consider it morally reprehensible or not, teens are having sex. The U.S. has the highest teen pregnancy rate in the developed world. In addition to this problem, 13 to 24-year-olds comprise nearly 20% of new HIV diagnoses as of 2008. While teen pregnancy and the spread of STDs are entirely preventable through abstinence, this option is neither realistic nor based on any universally accepted tenet that teens shouldn't be having sex. Atheists as a group have no defined view on premarital sex, but often have their own individual opinions, as can be found across a wide range of issues. The sensible way to deal with problems of pregnancy and STDs, though, whether in teens or adults, is to use, rather than demonize, contraception.
Thank you. Patrick Catholic, it's your time to ask a question if you see this.
Okay, just to start us off, what do you see as the purpose of sex? Does it have any other purpose beyond self-pleasure or self-gratification?
Sex definitely has a appropriate purpose, but I don't think it was meant for anything. I don't think we were created to have sex. I think biologically we have sex to advance our species, but it's also, we can enjoy it too. We don't have to procreate every time we have sex.
And you said self-pleasure. You can also pleasure the other person in the process of sex.
Okay, so let's say sex did not have any other purpose besides this self-pleasure. How does this make us different from the animal kingdom?
We're part of the animal kingdom.
Okay, sorry, I have questions all over this. Do you think that, are you under the impression that Catholics don't try to time or plan pregnancies?
I'm aware that it's acceptable in Catholicism to use the rhythm method or the calendar method to have sex like time every month.
Are you familiar with this method at all?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I think it's kind of hypocritical because you're not using, you're like circumventing, trying to, you're circumventing pregnancy when you're against contraception, so to me that doesn't really match.
Contraception in the root of its definition can be defined, so contraception, so against conceiving obviously. So just a quick clarification, natural family planning, which is the method of family planning endorsed by the Catholic Church, is not seen as a contraception because it still promotes like an openness to life. So even though it is 99% effective if used by the perfect user, the couple is still open to promoting life. So I just wanted to quick clarify that. So I guess, we do agree that it is irresponsible not to care for family planning. It's a no-brainer. But why contraception and not natural family planning?
Well, to me, natural family planning is the less effective method of contraception. It's 85% effective. The condoms are 99% effective if used properly. So, in my opinion, you're just selecting the less effective method for the same end.
Is contraception truly worth all of the adverse side effects that can come with it, worth the risk, when there is an alternative?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that question. I looked up some of the claims you made in the beginning, and I know you mentioned that IUDs cause endometriosis. A 2010 study of Italian women found that IUDs are actually highly effective at treating endometrial cancer, so that's obviously a good thing. And then the Depo-Provera shot also leads to decreased risks of endometrial cancer. Long-term studies have shown little or no increased risk of breast cancer, but there was a single study that showed a slight increased risk in users under the age of 35. And I found similar contradictions in our findings for pill and other methods.
Okay, so back to the question. Is it truly, there are undeniably risks though? Is it still worth the risk when there is an alternative that can, if you will, I mean, we believe that it promotes a more healthy relationship, if you will. Like I said in my statement, that, you know, it endorses this communal love. So is contraception truly worth not loving fully?
Well, provided you aren't allergic to latex, there's no negative consequence of using condoms. So that's one form of contraceptives that are totally fine.
This is actually to Laura, just because you were the only woman up there. It has to do a little bit with my statements. Do you, and this is quite personal, do you want a man to love you when he has sex with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, how do you know that he loves you?
How do you know that he loves you? I think you can ask the same question whether or not he's wearing a condom. Actually, I think he's wearing a condom. He loves me a little bit more.
And why is that? And why does he love you more if he wears a condom?
He's trying to protect me from being pregnant when I certainly don't want to be pregnant. And you know, STDs are heritable too, so he may not have been promiscuous to be able to pass me something I definitely don't want.
Thank you. That's actually all the questions that we have on that topic.
Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics, your questions.
Okay, I guess my first question is, how is sex less special when you know your partner is taking care to ensure neither of you is saddled with the responsibility of a child for which you aren't ready?
I'm sorry. That was really fast.
You're sorry. How is sex less special when you know your partner is taking care to ensure that neither of you is saddled with the responsibility of a child for which you aren't ready? So how is it less loving when your partner is trying to not get you pregnant when you don't want to be pregnant?
I would say that, I kind of elaborated this a little bit on my statements. I would say that he's not seeing my completeness as a woman. He's not seeing, and not that motherhood does define who a woman is, but obviously biologically it is a fundamental aspect of who we are, how we are created. And so I would say that if he is taking those preventative actions to not, you know, getting me pregnant, I don't know. I think it goes back to the fact that he still is denying a fundamental part of who I am, and that's not what sex is meant to be. Sex is meant to value, to recognize, and to love the other party, you know? So.
Isn't like the rhythm method just an attempt to get around getting a woman pregnant? Isn't that the kind of like half-love you described?
It still is open to life though, and so at any given time, although it is very much possible, you know, like, you can follow your calendar perfectly, and if you are a perfect user of natural family planning, your risk of getting pregnant, you know, chances of getting pregnant are much, much less. There is always still a chance that egg can fertilize, and that, you know.
It's the same with contraceptives though, like everything has a fail rate, whether it's natural family planning or contraceptives. So like, I understand, like, if God really would want you to be pregnant, wouldn't that happen, just no matter what you did?
I think the main distinction between a natural family planning method and a contraceptive method is that with natural family planning, you are conforming yourself and your own behavior to the way that God has designed us to be. And so the woman is naturally not fertile during part of the cycle, and that is, I mean, contraception is less of a social issue and more of a private issue, so we're talking more about God for this one. but that is the way that God has designed even the body and designed sex. So in natural family planning, we conform ourselves to the way we are designed, whereas in contraception, you are directly acting to controvert the natural purpose of the sexual act.
I guess I don't see the difference in trying to get around getting a woman pregnant whether you're using contraception or natural family planning, but I'll move on to a different question. That since you advocate not using contraception, would you support, or do you think it's reasonable to ask that families have as many children as they're biologically capable of producing?
No, that would be unreasonable.
How do you get around that though if you're not using any contraception? I mean, natural family planning is only 85% of families, so you're going to have bigger families. Like, can society really handle that?
The typical user is 85% effective. If the couple's actually really working at it, it is much more highly effective than that. And like, wait, I'm sorry, can you just repeat your first question?
Okay, I guess I don't see like how you plan envision a society that can have families as big as would be created if no contraception were used.
I don't think we should be afraid of children.
I think we should be afraid when the number of children we're having thrusts our children into poverty and endangers the resources available on our planet.
Giving birth and raising children also comes into having a committed relationship and being in marriage. And that in and of itself, sort of having that structure around the family and really making the family something with purpose, where you're investing love and relationship into building up that family. And that in and of itself adds some structure to society and also regulates the sex act and getting pregnant and having birth.
But you're still acknowledging the fact that children in larger families are at a higher rate of ending up in poverty. How do you rationalize having more impoverished children just because you don't want to use like a piece of latex?
Yeah, I guess that would just be actually a symptom of a much deeper issue in our society. That is, our government and doesn't provide job opportunities for people. Why are people even falling into poverty in the first place? The use, impoverished children is just a symptom of something much deeper. And so I think that in an ideal situation, and that's what Catholics do try to promote, that you do enter into marriage responsibly and you do have children when it's the time. It's not you're not trying to impoverish children and doing actually whatever you can to avoid that, obviously. And I don't think that it's responsible either to just take an easy way out. I think it is much more healthy for the couple and for the children, the future children, if this couple is truly devoted to one another physically, spiritually, emotionally, so.
What about couples that don't want to have children? Like, how do you feel about that? Is it wrong for them? I mean, I think it's wrong to use contraception, but do they have something intrinsically wrong with their relationship for not wanting to produce children?
We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier with the marriage topic, but we believe that marriage and children are very much linked, and so an individual should not go into marriage. We believe if they don't desire to have children. If that were the case, is that how time here?
This is the last question.
Okay. An individual should not enter marriage if children is not on their radar. We believe it goes hand in hand.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for the debate portion. Let's give it up for our panel debate. Now, at this point, we're going to bring some microphones up to the front. We're going to have have one right here. We have one right here. Whichever group that you plan to acknowledge with your question, please use the correlating microphone. So yeah, let's start setting that up. Those go on the back table. The atheist humanists and agnostics want to use that. They're on record. Statistics. So thank you very much. You guys can address whichever group you want, but it looks like the majority of people have questions for you guys. Yeah, and you can address all groups. So yeah, whoever's first, go on.
Hi, I have a question for Beth Atheists regarding contraceptives that you talked about. I was just wondering about your stance on women who have very irregular cycles, and if it would be okay for them to use contraceptive, being that natural clinic would not be a very viable option for keeping from having a child.
So I have a very irregular cycle, and there are a lot of, it's not just a calendar cycle that you can go on. You can do body temperatures, pressure increases your body temperature. You can do, this is really gross, your mucus changes. There are ways you can check that. It's not like, okay, this is just a calendar cycle. Yeah, it's involved with more. So just because somebody's irregular, there's other ways than just looking at a calendar and saying. Sorry, I'm really sorry to be gross and graphic.
So you're saying that it would still would not be normal?
Right, but there are other ways.
Thank you. Question over here.
Since you're saying that marriage is only for having children, and people who are not interested in having children or who are too old or past menopause and cannot have children, are you suggesting that those people should not get married and should have extramarital sex, or even that sex is only limited to people who are capable of having children, whether they have them or not? That is my menopausal wife. Do I have to stop having sex with her because she's menopausal?
Not at all. So I think there's maybe two pieces of that, and one was something that Madeline said, and one was my discussion about gay marriage. I think with the people who have a desire to have children, I mean, as Catholics we believe that children and marriage are intrinsically linked and you can't separate the two. If you were to enter marriage with absolutely categorically no desire to have children, it would kind of beg the question for us, why are you entering marriage in the first place? As to questions of infertile couples or menopausal couples versus gay marriage, that goes back to what I was trying to say before about, so we look at the intrinsic connection to creating and raising children to talk about what marriage is, but actually producing a child and having that result is not the thing that makes it valid. It's the type of relationship it is rather than its outcome. So an infertile couple is still a marriage is still that kind of relationship. A menopausal couple is still that kind of relationship, even if the result of their fertility is not a child, it's not an outcome in that way.
So you're supporting extramarital sex then?
No.
Because that's what you have if you don't get married.
I think people have the ability to control their sexual drive, and as a moral... is that so funny? Do you not agree that we have the ability to control our actions? We believe that extramarital sex is wrong. This is true.
Yes, the question that was done.
Oh, okay.
My question is in regards to abortion.
Can you turn your mic
My question is in regards to abortion and sort of your attempt to avoid drawing the line in the sand somewhere, as you put it, and you come up with this sliding scale as a result. So my question is, during pregnancy then, are these partial people in the womb? Is there such thing as a half person?
One thing, just to be clear on, line drawing is a fallacy, a logical fallacy, in which it is not real, so this could get a little bit.
Well, some things are, some things are not. That's no fallacy.
But to draw a line somewhere and make it different, one instance and the other. Yeah, Chris,
I mean, asking a question of if it's a person or not is the wrong way to look at it, because again, you're getting into this dichotomy of is it a person, is it not a person? And that's not how we look at it. We look at it as, is this thing, whatever you want to call it, is it worthy of moral concern? And the answer is, if it's a day-old fertilized embryo, it has very little moral concern. If it's a fetus in the third trimester, then it has a lot more moral concern. So I'm not interested in these, these games people play about, is it alive? Is it a human? Does it have, does it have a soul? Like, these are all questions that are not worth talking about, if you ask me. No.
One question for everyone in line. One question.
Okay, this is also about gay marriage. You said, again, that Catholics believe that marriage and children are very much linked. Your argument really boiled down to the fact that marriage has a traditional definition of raising children. Merriam-Webster's define marriage as the state of being united to a person of the same or opposite gender in a consensual and contractual relationship recognized by law. Accepting the truth that marriage has no definitional ties to childbearing, marriage is not a religious institution because it can be recognized by the state, and that this country has separation of church and state. On what legal grounds does our government have to outlaw gay marriage? Keeping in mind that if gay marriages were legal, you may still personally think it immoral, and like you said, there's no direct harm to others and doesn't infringe upon straight rights.
Well, that was a lot, so forgive me if I neglect a part of your question. First, I would contest your using Merriam-Webster's dictionary as a way to frame the argument. I mean, we can argue about what the definition of marriage is. I'm sure you have a different definition than the one I presented, obviously. But I'm not just going to exceed that Merriam-Webster is the final argument on that. Sorry, okay. What was your final piece of the question?
What legal grounds does government have to say that gay marriage is wrong?
Well, I think the legal grounds would be grounded in a reasoning about what marriage is. And so it does kind of stand or fall on that question. So I presented a view of what marriage is. I think that's...
Christian.
Oh no, did I ever appeal to the scriptures? Did I ever appeal to church teaching in that argument? I mean, I didn't. I think it's a logical argument. And obviously, in the culture we're in, religious people tend to favor that argument more than non-religious people. But I don't think that makes it a intrinsically Christian argument.
We also just like to add that part of our reasoning against gay marriage is because it's rooted in our biology. Men and women go together in a way that same-sex couples can't quite have that same connection, and that's sort of where marriage comes from too. So it doesn't need to be a religious argument that you want it to be. You can also see those definitions in that institution arising in current ways or that would make.
Question here on the left for ABC News and Agnostics.
You mentioned a lot about contraception curbing poverty, but I see a really big link between contraception and poverty because it's skyrocketed the rates of single motherhood, and those children are far more likely to grow up in poverty. So I would hear what you guys have to say about
that. I'd say that sure, perhaps increased use of contraception is the failures of contraception cause more single mothers, but I think that's overlooking the amount of unintended pregnancies and events, and also the huge benefits of not passing on STDs. I think that's taking a really just small look at the benefits of contraception.
And that's not poverty specifically, though.
Well, if you're using contraception correctly, then I mean, a small percentage is pregnant. So the larger families are generally, or should be using contraception.
Over here.
So that ends on just by means moral sense. You can't kill the life to save any lives. I'm paraphrasing it correctly.
Could you repeat the question?
He wants to know if the end justifies the means.
No, I asked her whether or not the end justified the means, and I wanted to ask her the thought experiment of killing a 90-year-old woman to save every single human being on the face of this earth. And would you do that? Would you kill a 90-year-old woman to save every single human being on the face of this earth? Thank you.
Are we talking moral ethic?
Ethical should.
If the direct outcome of killing her to save, no, cannot directly kill somebody to save every person. Yes.
Over here.
You were talking about how the development of human, or there's still development of human as human, and we made the argument that at first that's you're fulfilling your say we're human enough. Now, some can argue that if you take human development to the ultimate end, then you can say, no one's human, fully human until they're adult, and then afterwards you reach your pinnacle stage, and that it's been used by dictators to use that to eliminate the elderly or people that they think are less human. And I want to know how you argue when you take this to its ultimate sense, it can go very dangerously. So how would you keep that in check?
I would say that we do believe that fetuses are humans, they're Homo sapiens. But as we explained, we would not classify them as a person, just a ball of cells, as Chris said. And I think that the rights of ball cells are not equal to a woman that's carrying ball cells.
Let me answer your question more directly. In my arguments of the increasing moral worth of a person, I think I mentioned, but let me just make it more clear, you could imagine a logarithmic curve, so at the end of it, it plateaus, and I'm making the argument that it plateaus at birth and that it actually doesn't really continue on past there. You don't become more valuable as you get older, and there may be people who do think that people with diseases are less valuable or something, but that's not the position that we're taking. People who say that are wrong.
Wait, if I that's if you take the development of a human is developing, and you can say, well, afterwards, human still develops. So if you would take, I'm not saying you would take that, but I'm taking people, it's been used, and people use this argument taking it to a more extreme level. And so what is it that, and what are the safeguards to keep that from being taken to an extreme level? And why is it that, if you take it to an extreme level, it is obviously dangerous. So why is it a good argument that, why is that needed for that argument?
Okay, so I mean, if it's, I agree that it would be dangerous if people said that, but like you mentioned, we're not making that point. If you're asking how do we prevent that, well, we have laws where something like infanticide is illegal, and as it should be, I would say. So that's how we prevent, this slippery slope from happening.
All right, thank you. Question,
Now, this is not a leading question, like on both sides, it's a leading question to each other, but my question, I'm just kind of curious. Well, you can't choose what gender we are afterwards that's just how we're born. So since only women can have abortions, how do you justify passing some moral rule or the law?
Can you repeat the question?
So how can you justify passing a moral law or an actual law on just one gender?
I wouldn't consider this to be a gender issue. I'm looking at it as more of an issue concerning someone's ability to have life. And if you're ending a life, and perhaps if there are other forces at work in that relationship, and there could be other people to blame, I don't know. But ultimately, the value of a human life, when you end that life, that is a crime. And I mean,
but the decision is never fully rests on the male. Of course, it can be part of the decision-making process, but it never fully rests on him. So how can you only make that a problem for just one day?
Because it's the woman's decision who's making that choice. So inherently, I mean, you're right that it is ultimately the woman who goes through with it in the end. And so in that sense, abortion would be. It's not a gender issue. It's a life issue.
Right, but you can't just have just one single gender to fix the planet and stuff.
One question, please. I'm sorry. Not to
Thank you. Sorry. We were talking about contraception. You mentioned the cost of a child being too much friction, which I find to be a very sad reality that we would measure the worth of a child based on how much they cost. Because I would hope that each of you feels like you're worth more than the amount that you said. So, how in the end are we to measure the value of a child, or any person for that matter, if it's not you?
I don't think you can measure the value of a child, but I'm saying that how much it physically costs to raise a child in this country, because there is a cost associated with it, though it's not an assessment of that child's value at all. I'm just saying it's appropriate to use every means you have in terms of contraception to plan for your children, make sure you have enough to provide them as much as you'd like to, because they are valuable.
I'd like to ask about I'd like to talk about contraception for a second, but from a different perspective. When both sides were presenting, we were focusing mostly on contraception as a means of, they're focusing mostly on contraception as a means of but there's some could argue an even greater role for the world, which would be spread spread disease such as HIV. So my question is, the Catholic Church's official stance on condoms are that they are evil. And the Catholic Church will withhold funds, charity funds, from countries in Africa, for example, that refuse to condemn condoms. Is there argument that a 14-year-old achieving full womanhood is more valuable than her health? So if she uses a condom, you're saying that she never has true love, but maybe she can also avoid catching HIV. How can that be a greater moral good?
I just want to bring up a quick study that was done in Uganda recently, where Their response to this part of HIV was a kind of threefold attempt to first promote chastity and among youth. If that failed to work, they promoted monogamy within relationships, and if that failed to work, they would actually promote the use of condoms if it were the case. In the case of a 14-year-old girl, I mean, I don't believe a 14-year-old girl should be having sex, be it a cultural norm or not. Maybe that's my Western view, if you will. I think it is detrimental to the young girl to be having sex at that age. But back to your initial question, you said, are we willing to give up the health of?
Yeah, how can you make the moral claim that condoms are detrimental when they can prevent acquisition of something like HIV?
I think there are better ways to prevent HIV than simply condoms. I mentioned that just now.
Do we have a question over here?
My question is for the bearded gentleman. What's your name? Chris. Nice to meet you, Chris. You did say that regardless of what you feel, regardless of the way in which you feel the state should regulate it, abortion does personally trouble you on some level. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
I don't know if I said it troubled me in those exact words, but I think, all thinking people can recognize that there's, a conflict of interest going on there. And it's a question of, the rights of the mother versus the rights of this fetus, like once it's fertilized, when should it be protected by the law? And that's morally and practically a really difficult question to answer. But one thing that I'm certain of is the idea that a blastocyst is morally equivalent to a human being. That's just an untenable position to me.
You can see that happens when
No, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
As far as I know, my wife and I are both fertile. And for the past 6 years of marriage and the 6 years of monogamous dating before that, we chose not to test that, or we have any plans to test that. So I take extreme offense at the implication that our relationship is somehow less valid or less worthy from yours. That being said, on my question about contraception, you mentioned that we should not be good children. Due to the evolution or design of the large human skull, there are every reason to be very afraid of childbirth. Past a few thousand years, under 1 in 3 pregnancies is one of death in the mother. So it seems to me the happy fertile mother of 2, happy fertile mother of 3, who chooses to ensure that she will not get pregnant, lessening her chance of orphaning her children, seems to be a moral decision rather than the immoral one.
Sorry, I wanted to repeat the question, but walked away. I think I remember the last piece was, correct me if I'm wrong, that given the danger of childbirth, why is it not the moral decision for a mother of 3 to hold off on her children so that she can still be around to not make her children orphans?
I guess I would just like to mention that there is such a thing as chastity within relationships, and that a relationship is not only defined by sex, and that there are different ways of loving each other. But back to the I'm really flabbergasted by this question. I'm sorry.
That's what family planning is.
Yeah, like
that's the point of it. That yes, you need to be responsible. Then you should work on actual family planning. This does not say that you can't have sex. Like this says that there are times that you should maybe avoid having sex to reduce the risk.
And learn to love each other in different ways besides physically.
Thank you. Question over here?
My question goes back to the
the risks, such as, or understand the implications of having a child, such as, like I said, bring them below the poverty line, or if I have an STD or HIV, I understand the risks of me engaging in some sort of sexual contact with somebody else. But yet, these people are still willing to take those risks. Does that manifest a larger social issue about perhaps the responsibility of these individuals in our society?
I mean, are you asking if I think that having sex with someone when you're infected with an STD is that, are you asking if I think that's irresponsible? Or?
Well, I think we could all assume that, we could all say that's irresponsible, and that's what I'm getting at, is that if these individuals are willing to put themselves in this position, does that speak to a larger issue than just contraception in our society? Think about fixing that?
I mean, I think it's more of an issue with them and themselves that they're willing to put their partner at that kind of risk. I think the bigger issue is that they're not willing to use contraception. To me, it shows that they don't really care about their partners.
All right, thank you. Question over here for Patrick Campbell.
Okay. If infertile opposite gender couples can still fulfill all intrinsic parts of marriage, then the inability to naturally conceive does not make the relationship unable to fulfill the requirements of marriage. You feel the biological differences between males and females as a further distinction between same-gender couples and opposite-gender couples. But the only result of these biological differences is that same-sex couples cannot naturally conceive a child. So, by definition, the same thing as an infertile opposite gender couple, and not allowing them to get married is discrimination.
So the question is a statement that already has been answered.
Okay, then what else is it that makes an opposite gender couple different than same gender?
Well, I believe I actually already answered this question, but I'll take another crack at it. I think, so, the argument is that a relationship between a man and a woman, marriage is a particular kind of relationship, and you look at it, what it is, and